What's your oaf peep? I'm an ash peep moment. I was driving down a road and a lot of people were honking and yelling at me on the street. I got angry and flipped a bunch of people off and honked back. At the end of the street I saw a one-way sign and realized I was going in the wrong direction. Years ago I went into a Hot Topic, and as I was at the register, the girl working started telling me about all the new Metallica shirts they had gotten. For some reason, I told her I wasn't really into wearing band shirts anymore, which was mostly true, and even though I didn't mean to, it came out sounding really snobbish. At the time, I thought her reaction was kinda strange, even accounting for my accidental condescension. Shortly after I left the store I remembered I was wearing an in-shirt. Someone I hadn't talked to in years came up to me and started telling me about how they haven't been doing that good lately and that they found out they have cancer. Well, I was at work and only half paying attention, so after he stopped talking I said that's good. Haven't seen him since. In early high school, late 90s. So if you got a girl's number it was the house number. I called a girl's house and her dad answered. She was out, but I noticed his speech was a bit slow and slurred. Next day at school I mentioned I had called and asked if her dad had been. Turns out he didn't drink much since his stroke. Still feel awful about that. I was drunk at a pub and shouted for the band to play Free Bird. They stopped in the middle of the song they were playing, started up Free Bird, and called me up on stage to sing it. I froze, forgot all the lyrics, and made an absolute ass of myself. Props to that band though. I was making fun of an old guy I'd seen outside our school at a basketball tournament to some friends in the locker room. He looked and talked like Farmer Fran from The Waterboy. Turned out to be the dad of one of the guys I was talking to. Still can't even think of that movie without it bringing up endless amounts of shame. 8th grade. Speech class. A kid had been absent a few days, and when he came back, I started razzing him a bit. We were friendly, but not friends, so I felt okay kidding around, claiming he was just pretending to be sick to get out of class, that sort of thing. Nothing really mean, though. He took it for a bit, then turned, looked me dead in the eyes, and said in the flattest voice, "No, my mother died," and turned back around. If God had struck me dead with a bolt of lightning when I stood before him at the pearly gates, I'd have said yeah, fair enough. Broke up with my first girlfriend, who was really attached to me, just by ignoring her. I feel so bad. I was just a kid, but that was a harsh treatment. What's your name? I asked. Shera. Trying to be playful. Oh cool. Like backquote Sarah with a lisp. I have a lisp. My name is Sarah. Oof. When I realize the reason I've lost so many friends is that I'm so speepty at getting back to people. Posting on Reddit sometimes makes me reread my speep and realize I'm being an ash peep. I don't do it on purpose, but I think years of reading and writing posts on the internet has tainted my tone. My friend group tried to stay close after high school, but we all fell out of touch as you do as everyone forged their own path in life. Well, mine led me down a path of depression, anxiety, and failure. So every year or so they would hold a get together to reconnect and hang out. I attended a couple of these, but as time went on and my downward spiral got worse, I stopped responding to calls, texts, invites, etc. because I thought that no one would want to hang out with this version of me. I was invited to 2 weddings which I didn't even respond to because of this negative loop. And then when my best friend from that group was diagnosed with cancer, I couldn't even bring myself to face him. I tried to go to his funeral, but couldn't enter the building because I felt that I didn't deserve to be there. Finally, a few months ago, the parents of one of my friends saw me at work and wanted to talk to me. They told me that my friend group was really broken up, that I ignored all of their attempts to reach out to me. It was then that I realized that in all of my stress about being miserable to be around, I had become an ash peep to those who tried to care about me. I was in the army, making fun of a guy said he couldn't even get a medal for something in the Special Olympics. He then pointed out his daughter was in the Special Olympics. I profusely apologized, and he accepted, but it still keeps me awake at night. I developed a pretty serious drinking problem, and in one day everyone finally had enough. I got fired, kicked out of my apartment, disowned by my friends and my family. I was left utterly alone and homeless, with $2,000 and a 1986 Volvo station wagon. It was coordinated between everyone in my life, and it f***ing hurt. But I wouldn't take any of it back for the world. Things are far better now, but that was the sort of life event that is supposed to change you, and I'll let it do so for the better. When I was 16, I worked in a retail store and was in charge of the fitting room. You see people come in and out so much that you sometimes don't pay too close attention. A woman walked in with their preteen kid, so I pointed towards the ladies' side. I only side glanced and saw her kid was wearing a baseball cap with their head lowered and really baggy clothes. I immediately assumed the kid was a boy and pointed towards the men's side. They looked super awkward and uncomfortable before their mother corrected me and said she's my daughter. I apologized profusely, and their mom decided to nag her by saying, "See, with the clothes you wear, people think you're a boy." I felt even more terrible that I put her in this weird conversation with her mom. At the movies once it was just me and friends and one other group sitting in front. There was a guy in front that kept slurping on an icy really loudly. Like he just really wanted to get every last drop. After a few minutes I got really agitated and made a super obnoxious and loud slurping sound to make them aware that it was annoying me. Literally as soon as I did it, I saw that it was a disabled man and his parents, and he had a suction tube. I was so ashamed I walked out of the theater quietly whispering to them I'm so sorry. I never went back in. For years I used the same thing happened to me line whenever someone opened up to me. Instead of just shutting up and listening to them. But yeah, working on it. This entire year. Been recovering from my divorce last year, and it forced me to take a hard, honest look at myself and all the speep I used to do, and how I actually treated those around me. A lot of tough to swallow pills. But a lot of much needed reflection taken place. When you fight with your friend over something, leave, then realize they were right. I blamed my fart on a mentally challenged boy in 5th grade. I rang and paid for a mowing service, and when the guy rocked up, I started telling him that I can't mow the lawn myself anymore as my injured ankle would play up and hurt for the rest of the day. Then he got out of the car and I realized he was an amputee from the knee down. I told my friend that she shouldn't use medication for her mental illness because I was convinced she could just use sheer will to get through it. It was an Ash Pete move to make her second guess getting professional help to address her mental health issues. I wish I just instead offered support instead of trying to fix it when she mentioned the side effects, when I had no idea what I was talking about. This was when I was a teenager and thought I knew everything. I asked 2 black ladies at work what language they were speaking. I'm really big into languages, and I felt like I hadn't heard the one they were speaking before. English. They were speaking English, and they just both happened to have really thick accents. My girlfriend recently dumped me. Looking around my room and seeing all the things they bought me and being reminded of all the things they did for me and then noticing I hardly did anything in return. I used to tend bar. I was very busy at a freestanding bar. I was literally surrounded. I went to wait on the next customer. I made eye contact and asked what I could get him as I turned to throw something away. He gave no response. I asked again as I started wiping up a spot someone had vacated. No response. This kept going a couple more times. As customers were building up, I turned with a bit of attitude and said something to the effect of, "Sir, I'm getting deeper in the weeds and all these other people are getting pissed. You need to order or move aside so others can." He then informed me that he was deaf, and as I kept turning away, he couldn't read my lips. At HS graduation, a friend of mine was a foreign exchange student from Italy, and her parents were at the ceremony. I went up to them and just shouted, "Hi, I love Italians. IDKY. I just felt like a douchebag in that moment." One day while I was walking on the street, some kids kicked a ball in my direction. I was going to pass it back, but I thought one of the kids closer would just get it. I decided to keep walking. I looked back at the kid and I could see the look of disappointment on his face. I felt like biggest ash peep on the planet for a few days. I still feel bad thinking about it. Every time my kid asks to try what I'm eating, I always say that it's spicy and he won't like it, so I don't have to share. A lady told me she was hospitalized for months after she fell asleep at the wheel and drove her car off a cliff. She said she woke up right when the wheels went over, and I asked her, was it worth it? She stared at me, wondering what I meant. So I continued, "Now you know what it's like to fly in a car." Nearly every tantrum I had as a kid. When I realized I picked a side that benefited me more over the one which would be the correct side multiple times in arguments, fights and every other situation where such decision can be made. My buddy wanted to set me up with a new coworker of his. I got to his apartment early and started getting drunk with his roommate. He called and said they were going to be late. He said, "She's a bigger girl. Don't mention her weight." He had told me this previously as well. By the time they showed up, I was pretty drunk and I wanted to make a good impression. I said, "You're not nearly as fat as they said you were." She turned around and fled. I was running a bit late for work one afternoon, and traffic was oddly heavy for part of the drive. All these cars were driving like 15 under the speed limit. As soon as the road opened to 2 lanes, I slammed on the gas pedal and flew around this ridiculously slow line of cars until I got to the car in the front driving so slow and realized it wasn't just some slow ash peep. It was a hearse, and I just flew past a funeral procession. In my defense, everyone I'd seen before had their hazards on and little flags on each car, so this sort of thing doesn't happen. But I felt awful. I honked my horn at a car that stopped and blocked the road, only for a really old frail woman to slowly get out and very slowly get across to a food shop. This was during the last lockdown, and was probably the only way she could get food. I still lie awake wishing I could say sorry, but it wasn't possible. Teacher here. Walked into my coworker's classroom, loudly and obnoxiously mocking a man from the district who is supposed to help us with instruction and provide support. She ushers me out of her room immediately and starts laughing, cause he was sitting in there to observe her next class. Every time I get angry at my mum. I grew up fairly poor, and as a kid, the concept of money didn't mean much to me. I just knew we had less things than the other kids in my class. So when the Nintendo started getting super popular, I asked my mum for one. She obviously refused, since we couldn't afford it, but apparently, later on that evening I had drawn a picture of a Nintendo along with a comic strip of me and my mum playing a game on it together. Apparently she had stayed up that entire night crying because she had felt guilty about not being able to afford it, as my dad told me years later. Just 3 seconds ago I had to stop myself from responding a Redditor parent that their child's Halloween costume is really f***ing ugly. I walked into Home Depot bathroom one evening just before close. As soon as I went in I heard a sad voice from the stall say, "Hello? Can you get me some toilet paper?" I proceeded to slowly back out, hop in my car and go home. I don't know why I did it, but I choose my path that day.